Alright guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be dealing with IV fluids. So the first thing you're going to do with any sort of problem is check to see whether or not this is a math problem or a medical problem. Well, what do I mean by that? If this is just a math problem, I'm going to run you through it and it's going to be pretty straightforward. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, hey look, they're getting 100 milliliters of who cares what over 8 hours, right? In terms of math, I don't care what you give them over 8 hours. It could be antifreeze. That's not going to affect anything unless you care about how many milligrams of sodium or glucose or whatever they're getting, right? But the only thing the problem is asking for is at what rate do you set their IV for, right? It's not talking about what rate do you set the IV for to get so much sodium. No, it's saying, hey, look, this is how much fluid I want you to give, and this is what time I want you to give the IV fluid for. And so in this setup, what happens? What matters? The only thing that matters is I'm getting 100 milliliters of fluid in that 8 hours. And so if you gave the person 100 milliliters, then 8 hours have gone by. If 8 hours have gone by, you gave that person 100 milliliters, right? And so this 8 hours is going to be equal to 100 milliliters. And so anytime the top unit is equal to the bottom unit, you've just created a fancy one, right? And so, the example I like to give is, for example, 8 over 8, right? It doesn't matter if I spell E-I-G-H-T out up top or if I spell E-I-G-H-T down bottom, right? Or if I put the number 8 down bottom, right? 8 is equal to 8. And so any number divided by itself is equal to a fancy 1. It doesn't necessarily look like a 1 in the case of 100 milliliters over 8 hours, but it is a fancy 1. And this is going to become very important in just a second. So right here, I already know how much fluid I'm getting over 8 hours, right? I'm getting 800 milliliters. I'm getting 100 milliliters over 8 hours. I want to know how much I'm getting per 1 hour. Well, if I divide 8 by itself, it doesn't change anything, right? Remember, this is a fancy 1. It doesn't change the fact that I'm still getting 100 milliliters over 8 hours, right? But when I divide 8 by itself down bottom, right, any number by itself becomes 1. So I figured out what's going on in 1 hour. And so when I divide 100 by 8, I get 12.5. Now, this is why I teach students to do it this way. So what happens? Oh no, 12.5 what? Mosquitoes, toilet paper rolls? I have no idea. Well, you don't have to guess, right? This is telling you, look, what's my unit down bottom? MLS. So then right here, my unit over here has to be MLS. That's the only unit I have up top. Down bottom, what's my unit? Hours. So what does my unit have to be over here? Hours. And so I figured out that this patient is going to get 12.5 milliliters per hour. Right? If you're going 60 miles per hour, in 1 hour, you went 60 miles. If you went 60 miles, it took you 1 hour to do it. Right? That's what's happening here. Now, why did I say you're doing both medical and you're doing math, right? In terms of math, I don't care what you give them, right? But if you're giving the person arsenic in terms of medical, that's not a good idea, right? So you want to be aware of any sort of limitations that we have on these things. All right, if you're an isotonic solution, that means the concentration of the solution is going to be roughly equal to that of blood. And so you should be able to deal with a fairly large amount of isotonic solutions. Now with a hypotonic, what does hypotonic mean? Well, that means that this fluid is less concentrated than blood, right? And so be aware if there are any limitations as to how much hypotonic solution you can get, right? If you get too much hypotonic, it can cause your red blood cells to burst. It might cause seizures because of swelling of the brain. So be aware of any limitations and always check with your doctor to make sure. All right. Next thing we got is a hypertonic solution. So these solutions right here are more concentrated than what your blood is. And so if you get too much in a short period of time, it can actually cause your brain to shrink. It may cause permanent paralysis. So definitely be aware of the limitations.